In today's video, I'm going to show you the exact formula to calculate your FI number. That's financial independence. And you may have heard of this thing called the FIRE movement. That's financial independence, retire early. But for the sake of this video, I'm only going to focus on the FI of FIRE because once you reach FI, the rest is really up to you. You can retire or not retire or work part-time, pursue a passion or a hobby, travel. That's the whole point of FI. It's freedom, flexibility, and options. Okay, but what is a FI number? Let's start there. It's the amount of money you need to have invested in a retirement portfolio so that you can live off the interest, the capital gains, and the dividends for essentially indefinitely. In other words, you no longer have to trade your time for money. Work has therefore become optional if you follow the right formula. In this case, we're going to talk about the 4% rule, but more on that in a bit. But why does your FI number matter outside of it being sort of your obvious target for retirement? Well, for me, I look at it as the ultimate big goal. It's really easy if you don't have a big goal to get off target and maybe fall back into bad habits. So as I see myself getting closer and closer, and don't get me wrong, I'm still pretty far away, towards my FI number, it gets me really, really excited. It's that quick little hit of dopamine to just keep on going and keep pushing forward. But before we get to any numbers and calculations, and I promise there's no crazy brain busters or scientific formulas here, I want to quickly tell you a bit about who I am and why you should let me bend your ear for the next 10 minutes or so. Bend your ear. Whatever. What's up, guys? My name is Frankie. This is the Money Resolution, where we talk all things save money, make money, get out of debt, and invest so you can retire on time or hopefully early. I put out videos once a week, so definitely consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Like this video if you get some value out of it, and stick around until the last 5 minutes or so of the video because I'm going to walk through some concrete numbers that I think really help solidify the exercise. I'm also going to give you all kinds of recommendations if you want to learn more about FI, my favorite books, my favorite podcasts, a movie, and also a couple of FI calculators I recommend you sort of toy with online to help you find your FI number even faster. Quickly, I wanted to share why I've been putting out a couple of videos in a row here about financial independence. When I started my money resolution roughly 2.5 years ago on a mission to DIY my money from scratch, I took about 1.5 years to crawl back to net worth zero. That was my goal. But then when I hit net worth zero and just barely crossed into net worth positive, I needed a new goal. My goal that I set at that point was to invest $100,000 towards retirement. A little over a year later, I hit that goal, and I once again found myself saying, now what? What's the next goal? What's the next target? FIRE came to mind very quickly. It's something I've written about in both of my books, so I decided to dig into the topic a little bit more and find my FI number. This exercise led to this video. Now, 2 videos ago, I talked about increasing your savings rate in retirement calculators. I recommend saving half, and I shared why I do. In my last video, I talked about the 7 steps to gaining financial independence by highlighting concrete ways that you can save and invest money. And today I'm going to take a little bit of a step back and help you understand what your number is. What are you saving for? Because saving money is great, but what's your target? What's your end goal? How much do you actually need to retire on time, or in this case, hopefully even early? So my goal is by the end of this video, you're gonna know exactly how to calculate your FI number and that you're gonna be excited to do so. That last part's gonna be hard, but I'll try. This video is rated PA for positive attitude. You must have a positive attitude or someone sitting next to you with a positive attitude holding your hand. Totally just kidding. I'll bring the positive attitude. I'm into virtual hand holding, but I actually bring up mentality for a reason. When you do calculate your FI number, especially if this is the first time you're doing this, I am gonna warn you that it's going to be a scary number. It might be 800,000, a million, 2 million, who knows? And it's gonna seem sort of unrealistic and super far off. This is exactly why so many people develop this I'll deal with it later mentality, and they kick the can down the road. It's so discouraging to think about retirement 20, 25, potentially 30 years from now. So a lot of people just say, screw it. I'd rather live in the moment and spend my money because after all, who knows how long I'm actually gonna live? And that's fine if you wanna work until you expire. Die, whatever, just sounded too morbid. I know that I definitely don't. The other problem with this mentality is this is what has led to such a horrible consumer culture, especially here in America. We think we need to buy things or have experiences to find true happiness. And I'm here to tell you that I have learned, especially recently, that that is absolutely not the case. Changing your mentality about money and savings and thinking about the future, this has actually given me more happiness in my everyday life and led to more appreciation for just the things that I already have and the people around me. Even those that identify as being in the FIRE movement or identify as a minimalist certainly have things, they certainly have experiences. They just know that when they spend their money, it's more thought out. And the beauty in that is that you feel zero guilt when you actually do spend the money. Having a plan is what lets me know that I can travel every single year, or sometimes, yes, save up and buy that new PlayStation 5, for example. Having a goal is everything. If you don't have a goal, it's so easy to get off track and either build bad habits or fall back into old bad habits. That's a lot more exposition than usual, so let's jump right into the 3 steps that you need to take to calculate your FI number. Step 1 is to determine your annual expenses. And admittedly, this can be actually a little bit of a difficult process if you're not somebody who already budgets and tracks every single dollar. So the best way to get started here is to look at the last 30 days of your spending. Once you find that number and look at all of your accounts and credit cards and such, multiply that number by 12 to get your annual spending. If you find out your number is $4,000, multiply that by 12, for example, that's $48,000. Of course, this might be a bit of a simplification. What I recommend is you actually average out the last few months of spending, because depending on the time of year, the last month could look a little bit different financially, spending-wise, than it normally does. Maybe last month you took your annual vacation, like I actually did, or last month was the holidays, or you did splurge on a purchase, or perhaps on the other side, you earned your annual bonus or inherited money. You get the idea. The year 2020 is a really great example of this. 6 months ago or 8 months ago looked a lot different than it does here in September of 2020 because of self-quarantining. For the last 6 months, I've spent hardly any money except that John Wick bundle I had to have because it was on sale for $9.99. For bonus points here, you can actually use some online software. One that I recommend is Personal Capital. It's totally free to find your actual spending number from the last 12 months. I actually did a video on the channel here as a tutorial straight up for beginners if you're just getting started with Personal Capital. But I'm gonna be honest, it's a really easy software to use as long as you know your login information, your password information for all of your different accounts. This is also an excellent place to track your net worth and see how close you're getting to that FI number. So to quickly recap, step 1, it's to find your annual expenses by either simply looking at the last 30 days of spending and multiplying that by 12, or even better, using an online software, something like Personal Capital, to find your actual spending in the last 12 months. Step 2 is super simple compared to step 1. You take your annual spending and you multiply it by 25. It comes from the 4% rule, which I'm gonna cover in just a moment. But multiply your annual expenses by 25 and that's it. You already actually have your FI number, but be sure to stick around because I'm gonna dig into this a little bit more, especially in step 3. There's a few things you're definitely gonna wanna consider that might impact this number. So let's say somebody sat down and calculated their annual expenses and it was $40,000. Multiply that number by 25 and it comes out to a cool even $1 million. Now you might be wondering already, if you're married, what do I do in this scenario? You will be adding up the annual expenses for both of you, putting it together, multiplying it by 25, and now you're gonna find your combined FI number. And if you're wondering, I wrote down a few examples here. $50,000 in annual expenses comes out to $1.25 million, $75,000 comes out to $1.875 million, and $100,000 comes out to $2.5 million, just to give you a general sense and range here. And again, all those numbers are the number you need to have saved and invested to reach financial independence, where work, therefore, becomes optional. But all of this only works because of something called the 4% rule, which I've mentioned a couple of times. In short, this is your safe withdrawal rate from all of your investments every single year once you hit financial independence. So once you reach FI, if you take out just 4% and leave the other 96% alone, you should conceivably never run out of money. And I'm not just making this up. There was actually a study done at Trinity College in 1998. I won't bore you with the details, but they looked at all kinds of different scenarios, real scenarios historically, all kinds of different portfolio makeups from 100% stocks to 0% bonds and the opposite. And they found that there was no scenario that before 33 years you would run out of money if you took out just 4%. And this again accounted for real historical data. So the Great Depression was included in this research, as well as the stock market drop of the early 1970s. Now, one of the best parts of this study is that it actually accounted for inflation. So let's say 4% of your portfolio was $50,000. That means in year 1, you can take out $50,000, but you can increase it by 2% the next year. So that's $51,000 and so on from there. Now, one quick note about taking money out annually. You could do it on January 1 for the entire year, but what I recommend you do is actually take it out quarterly or even monthly. So quarterly would be 1%. Leave the rest invested. That way it has an opportunity to continue to grow. So just to recap here, if you pull out 4%, what would happen to the other 96%? It would remain invested. And the idea here is that you want to not touch the principal balance if at all possible. Live strictly off of, again, capital gains, the investment earnings, as well as dividends. If the stock market has grown roughly, let's call it a conservative 7% annually historically, and you're only taking out 4% of your portfolio, you can very quickly see why you may never run out of money. But of course, the Trinity Study did account for the ups and downs and the fluctuations in the market, because some recessions will last, up to 13 months, where it could be a big down year, but then the next year could be a huge up. So in the long run, you won't run out of money is the idea. 4% rule is a super safe, widely accepted rule of thumb, especially from those in the FIRE community, to help you understand how much you can take out each and every year. And your FI number is how much is enough to retire so that you can live off of 4% of that portfolio each year. Okay, part 3 isn't required, but it definitely could apply to you. And I'm gonna break it down in 2 quick steps. Now, the first step is that you're gonna wanna consider any passive income you expect to bring in consistently come retirement. So you're gonna wanna subtract that from your pre-25x number. Let's say come retirement, your number was $50,000, but you expect to bring in $5,000 a year in passive income. You would subtract $5,000 from that $50,000 number to come up with $45,000. Now you're gonna multiply that number by 25. So some passive income examples. I've personally written and published 2 books. I've dabbled with affiliate marketing. I'm hoping one day to perhaps get monetized on YouTube. Just a few examples there. For you, that could look a lot different. Perhaps you've monetized a blog or started a podcast, or perhaps you've invested in real estate, which is one of the safest, most reliable sources of passive income. This step though can be a little bit tricky because, for example, maybe my book in the future hits the bottom of the bargain bin, or podcasts become super uncool again, which hopefully that doesn't happen, or YouTube decides to demonetize everybody, or it just disappears altogether. It can be really hard to bank on passive income, so definitely proceed with caution here and only bank on any that you are certain is going to come through. By the way, when we subtracted that 5,000 from that 50,000, our FI number actually shifted from 1.25 million to 1.125 million. Now, the second part of step 3 is some of you might be asking yourself, what if I already have some money saved and invested? That's a great question. You're gonna subtract that number from your post 25x number. So let's go back to that 1.125 number from part 1 of step 3 here. And let's say you already had $125,000 saved. You would subtract that from the big number, and you're gonna come up with an even $1 million. That's your new FI number. And the simplest way to do this is actually through a FI calculator, and I'm gonna recommend a couple here in just a moment. Let's recap the 3 steps to determining your FI number. Step 1, determine your annual expenses. Step 2, multiply that number by 25 because of the 4% rule. Step 3, which is optional, adjust your equation depending on the amount of passive income you expect to receive consistently and any money you already have invested. That's it for the steps, but now I'm gonna give you a few rapid fire recommendations if you wanna learn more about FI. 2 podcasts I love are the Choose FI podcast as well as the Bigger Pockets Money podcast. 5 books I recommend are The Simple Path to Wealth, Your Money or Your Life, The Automatic Millionaire, Financial Freedom, and Meet the Frugal Woods. And I'll put a link to all of my favorite books here in the description down below. A movie I recommend, I actually backed it on Kickstarter. It's called Playing with Fire. It's a documentary of a family that decided they were gonna pursue fire. There's also a great book from the same people called Playing with Fire. And that's a great transition actually to fire calculators I recommend, because playingwithfire.com does have a great one. Another one I recommend is from networthify.com. I wrote down a couple of notes. I didn't know where they fit with everything else, so I just want to quickly cover these, which is once you hit your FI number, do not overreact to the market. The 4% rule only works if you do steadily pull out 4% each year. Don't panic, things go up and down, but in the long term, your investments will grow. This is especially easy to not panic or do anything drastic if you have an emergency fund built up. I'd aim for 3 to 6 months of expenses and park it in a high interest savings account. I also recommend that you recalculate your FI number every 6 months or at least once a year. This year, again, in 2020 with COVID is a really good example of why you should do that. Outside of COVID though, our spending habits certainly change. Perhaps you had a major life event in this last year, like getting married, or you had a kid, or you made a huge purchase like a car, or even bigger, a house. Or once again, on the opposite side, maybe you inherited some money and so on. So always important to recalculate your FI number. And before I go, I wanna ask a quick question. What is your why of FI? Why would you be pursuing this? What would it mean to retire early? What would you do when you reach financial independence? I'm super curious about you and your story and where you might be at in your journey. Let me know down in the comments below. I'll be sure to comment back to all of you. And don't negative at me in the comments down below. Remember, this video is rated PA. I'm just kidding, you can vent at me. It's totally fine. That's what the internet's for. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Once again, my name is Frankie. This is The Money Resolution. I put out personal finance videos once a week, so definitely consider subscribing if you haven't already. Like this video if you got some value out of it. Perhaps share it with a friend. Best of luck to you in your journey, no matter where you're at, where you're starting from, or what your end goal is. I really do hope that if nothing else, you thought a little bit about consumerism and what it actually does look like and feel like to be happy. And I can't wait to talk to you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching. Oh, I probably should have started this video with, do not take financial advice from random strangers on the internet, unless they're really smart and big finance nerds. Just kidding, erase that part. Seek out professional advice as always. All right, I might be a minimalist. I got the black shirt, plus I got the iced coffee off camera. Oh, it's delicious. I've never filmed before 8 a.m.